Hello and happy 2024, my friends from Sanctuary in the Woods from all over the place. We're in North America, we're in the north of America, we're in the south of America, east and west, and the weather is different in every place. But can we just say the weather has been odd? Yes? Interesting.
Challenging.
Such challenging. There's so many words for the weather this year so far. But anyway, we were glad that, come heck or high water, somehow y'all found us in here. And so we were excited to open up our conversation on In Memoriam. And yet first, I have got to do a little tiny bit of inviting because Cynthia, of all people, gave me a call this afternoon, right, Cynthia?
Yes.
And you were recently on, let's see, it's a small ship called, the Queen Mary, right?
Yes.
For God's sake, the Queen Mary. But she was sitting at dinner with good friends of Cheryl's and mine from MCC Toronto.
Yep.
That was just what a small world. And
Right.
Yet on the topic of cruises, Cynthia and I were chatting, and we want to make sure everyone knows, you, your friends, friends, the Sanctuary at Sea is back, and we're back with a vengeance. We're excited to help Tom and Ken celebrate 50 glorious, probably 49 and a half glorious years of those 50, but 50 years together. And what we're doing is we're going on a cruise, a Carnival cruise this November, from November 2nd to the 10th, a nice long cruise. And we have a little flyer, or you can go to our website, you can go to our Facebook page, you can ping me tonight and I'll send this to you. But all of the details. So Sanctuary at Sea is back. The dates, we're taking off out of Galveston. Normally we all get to Galveston the night before, have a big dinner and meet each other. Here's kind of the crew. Here's some details about booking. I think a little bit ago, Cheryl, there were only 14 balcony rooms left in our reservation block. That doesn't mean you can't still, once we hit that number, you can still come on. You can still come on as part of Sanctuary. We just can't guarantee the prices, which are on page 2. So down here, ports of call is Key West and Freeport, Half Moon Cay, and Nassau. So 4 ports of call. And over here we have the pricing as well. So all that's figured out. All that's really quite smooth. We've had many people test it, registering cold, and Carnival has been fantastic about that. So if you're at all interested, 1, please feel invited. 2, we'd love you to come. 3, we can get that flyer out to you. Some of you may have gotten it in the mail. Some of you may have gotten it on email. It's been attached to our Sanctuary email that Barb has sent out a couple times in the last little while. It's on our Facebook page. I think it's on the web page. If not, I'll put it there. So however you need it. And Cynthia, I've got an email coming to you probably tomorrow with some extra details, because Cynthia, as usual, isn't coming alone. She's bringing her fan club. So I love that.
I hope.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. This year, honestly, we have about, as far as the registration goes so far, we kind of like have half regular Sanctuary at Sea cruisers who cruised with us before. We had a cruise in 2018 and 2019, and then COVID hit. And then about half of those are also new cruisers. So if you haven't cruised, it's time. If you have cruised before, you're overdue. Let me see. If you cruise all the time, one more can't hurt. Can you think of anything else? And I promise you'll never have cruised with a more fun group. We put the fun and the Carnival in Carnival. But I'm going to stop talking, Cheryl, and give them to you, because they come to see you, not me. So here you are, you beautiful people. Enjoy the conversation. Joby out.
Joby out. All right. So this was quite the book, eh?
Yes.
Oh, we lost Ken. I hope he comes back soon. So let's talk about what some of the first impressions or surprises were. What surprised you? What was some of your first impressions?
Well, I couldn't get over how much I don't know how to even say this. Fighting, war. It just, it showed me the reality of it all that we don't usually get in any books, in my opinion, but it was just so brutal. And everyone wondering when their friends were going to die. That was very hard on me.
Yeah.
I had a hard time with it.
Hmm.
And I talked to Ken and I said, I don't know if I can do this. And he said, keep going. I did. Mm-mm.
It was tough, right?
It was
Yes.
tough. It
It was
was tough.
quite gruesome, you know,
Yeah.
I thought, and it was
Very.
like, God, I just, and I know that because it was World War I, you know,
Yeah.
but man, that just means any war before that or that time frame was just really messy, you know? And
it's also going on right
I
now.
think one of
That hit home.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. One of the things that made me think this book is really important, is that it brings war. I mean, first of all, when I read about this book, I thought it was going to be a love story between these two soldiers, and it is. But this book is really an anti-war book. That's what it is. This book is about how war affects individuals, relationships, even societies.
Whoops.
Oh, we lost a mid-sentence.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
chime in on that thought. I happened to see something this week that said all veterans give their lives for their country, some in the theater and
Agreed.
some later. And that, you know, and
Yeah.
being the wife of a disabled veteran, you know, I feel that very much. And this book, I think, like Ken was saying, did really talk about the fact that anybody who goes to war is changed forever in not good ways, for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were so young. I mean,
And it just, it makes us, it brings home what's happening in our world right now. So even though we have all of this modern,
Yeah, we have all
He's-
this.
He's going to be this way all night, folks. He's just got a terrible internet. And normally, if you've been with us in the last, he's been able to use Barb's hotspot, but she's
Yeah.
traveling to Florida right now. So let's just trust he comes in, he comes out, he comes in, he comes out.
Yeah.
Again, whenever you're
I'm
in.
sorry, y'all, that's just,
That's okay. We'll just give you the floor whenever you're in. Go for it.
yeah. Even though we have all of this modern war technology where you can push a button and kill people, 5,000 miles away, the brutality of war that this book just brings home to us, it's right in our faces, as Cynthia said all the time. There are things just like that happening in Gaza today. There are things
Oh, yeah.
just like that happening in Ukraine today, and it's happening all over Africa. Just that brutal, no less brutal or bloody or gory or horrible or inhumane, than what the book describes. And so that's what kind of justifies all of that blood and guts and gore to me, is that this book, I think, really is a book more even about war than it is about romance. Of course, I love the love story, part of it. The idea of stories about romance during wartime, is.
I think he's gone.
I was gonna add to, while we're waiting for Ken to reconnect, what Bud said about them being like children. You start off with, so much going this at them at school, and the initial like letters they're writing, and they're talking about like, oh, like if I come home, I can come back to school. And then these schoolboys who, are anxious to join up, even when they're technically too young and wanting to go and wanting to prove themselves. and then discovering the reality when they get there. And you know, even in their correspondence back and forth, and these young men in particular, you know, being so prolific with their words, being so literary, still not having the words to convey to anyone who's not been there just how bad it is. And then you find them like latching on to somebody who's been there as long or longer, or latching to someone who was at the same battle and can understand the nightmare, or who like even like more and more specific throughout it. And I had to keep reminding myself that none of this is men. This is all boys. You know, this
Yeah.
is boys. Like
Yeah, they
just
were.
learning so
And-
much about themselves. Like the whole everything for me, like the love story is very much like an arc of self-discovery and finding themselves, but then finding it in these like most brutal of conditions too.
Yeah. Anybody else with that?
Well, they also pretty much knew when they get back, if they get back out of this war, they're going to have to marry a
Yeah.
woman. And what, the sister, and she
Right,
knew
Maud,
they were gay.
yeah.
Didn't she know they were gay? She knew they were.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. He did.
You know, there's a lot of literature about that particular understanding of the construction of sexuality in young males, and particularly around English boarding schools.
Yes. Whoops.
Yeah. Let's just talk about that a little bit. You know, what about that? The English boarding schools and the way the boys treated each other. I mean, had you guys heard of this kind of stuff before? Were you familiar with it?
Oh yeah, Prince Charles talks about, or King Charles talks about how he was treated. And his father insisted he go to that cold, barren school, and he just hated every minute of it.
Yeah.
And they were, you know, struggling.
Saltburn. Has anybody seen Saltburn?
No.
Yes.
Rose,
heard.
oh, there you go. You have Rose?
Yeah, it's really good. Very good. It's a psychological
Yes.
thriller type movie.
But it's the boys' school in what? I guess it was Oxford, maybe. I can't remember.
But they started really young, right? This wasn't just high
Yeah.
school. They were there when they were, I don't know, 9, 10 or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, then they grow up together, right? But it is it's this
Well, it's like Hogwarts. You go away at 11.
just like Hogwarts.
And some of them go away even younger. There's some schools that'll take kids at 6.
Yeah.
Thought it was interesting that, you know, certainly the culture created by the authority figures at the school is, you know, cold and demeaning and all of that. But in that you find the boys, you know, turn to each other for not just friendship, but comfort. And, you know, I think it's like pretty early on where they're talking about like, well, like, look, everyone knows it happens, but you're not supposed to talk about it. Like that's like, no. And the realization even that for some of them, maybe it was just temporary. And then but when we grow up, you know, I'm gonna obviously, you know, get married and have children and live a proper life. And like where the tolerance is as they get older and go off to war, and like, where is it okay to just pretend it's temporary as long as you don't talk about it too much.
Yeah. Well, and that, I mean, that's kind of boys, especially when they're just all boys right there together, just kind of figuring things out, right? And there was some power over stuff going on, you know, with the older boys to the younger boys. So a combination of all that, you know.
Yeah.
And then for the ones that really cared, I mean, you know, Gaunt and Elwood were both having sex with these other boys. And how were they with each other? They couldn't quite go there.
Well, and that's what amazed me, you know, having had such close women friends, and, you know, we tell each other how we feel about each other as well as about the other people in our lives. And the fact that it took them so long to tell each other how they felt. I found that surprising, given they were in an all boy environment. I would have thought maybe it was easier to have those kinds of conversations, but obviously not.
That was a question that I had for, y'all. It seemed like their communication was, well, not very good, but it was just kind of
a lot of teasing, a lot of, not direct communication.
Yeah.
right. Poetry, use poetry
Yeah.
for communication.
Right. Which is not like today, we wouldn't call that very masculine. Like, oh, we wrote each other poems, right? So I found that like really almost contradictory of they would write poems to each other, they would lay in the grass with each other. At one point he's like, oh, this is the one, I could talk to him about my soul and that, but what you couldn't express is that the fooling around was an actual affection.
Mhm.
Like that was the line there. And then I think I remember there was even one bit when he was like, they were in war and I think they were like on a train or something. And he's like, oh, like they were like bodies were touching each other. And he's like, started to pull away and realized, oh, everybody's touching each other. And they're like, oh, in this very masculine world, we're not worried about seeming too masculine. So like on the one hand, you could be like more laid back and less macho, as long as you didn't admit you were actually for real gay. You could just act gay because there was nobody else around. So it's
Mhm.
like, it's okay to pretend as long as it's temporary.
Mm.
As
Well,
long as you don't admit that
It-
you actually want that to be a relationship.
Go ahead, Ken.
in Western cultures, that's the way we're socialized. Males are socialized, to be able to show everything except intimacy with each other. And it's not when I was in Asia I traveled all over Asia. It would surprise me, like I was in Pakistan, grown men would take my hand and hold my hand as we walked around the city. When I was in Thailand, I would go out into villages where men would lie in hammocks together with their arms around each other and their legs thrown over each other. And that was not perceived, in any kind of negative way whatsoever. But in Western culture, there is that horror of intimacy between males because all of Western culture is built on the assumption that males will compete with each other.
Mhm.
And if you love another man, you're not going to try to destroy him, either in business or in war or in anything else. And so in Western culture, we are literally socialized and socio-sexualized, to compete and not to share intimacy with other males.
Yeah. And not even, and a lot of it, I mean, it's right there in North America, because I know when I was in high school in Spain, the men always were holding on to each other, walking down the streets, holding on to each other. The women always walked with their hands, holding hands or, whatever. And our silly American, my American compadres that I went to school with lean their heads out the window and yell things at them, gay or whatever they yelled at them. And I'm like, really, this is, but it is, it's particularly, I think, North America, even more so than in Europe, or at least back then. Yeah, not allowed. Even what about this using last names?
I saw that as a sign of the times.
Yeah.
That was just like, like I read a lot of historical fiction. Like that's my niche. And you just didn't use first names in the upper class. Like that just wasn't appropriate. Even if you watch like Downton Abbey, they call each other all by their last names. And yet the idea that then that is so very, very intimate, it's interesting to me was more interesting how culture has changed, that
Mhm.
everyone is just more casual with each other. In a way, the pendulum has swung so far the other way. in almost like a lack of respect of almost never using last names and titles, you know, even in situations where I used to use it. But certainly then it was like the extreme of, it's like, oh, I would never use like a first name, a Christian name. Like that's the name his wife will call him one day, I think they say at one point.
Yeah. Is that, do you
Yeah,
have any
this is very
experience of
much
that
an
in your life?
insight into aristocracy.
Insight into aristocracy, Ken?
Yeah, upper class, upper social levels. You're called by your last name because you would be recognized for your family status and titles and
Yeah.
everything else by your last. You wouldn't be recognized by that if they called you by your first name.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's very interesting because remember Hayes, who didn't come from that class,
Right.
Mhm.
he went by David, right?
Well, I think they even said at one point,
Mhm.
like, oh, like
Right.
to be like lower class or American, like to use it, like that's those disrespectful,
Yes.
lazy Americans using
Yeah.
first names.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of interesting. Anybody have any personal experience with that in their life where you get called by your last name in school or when you were
My
young?
ex only calls me,
Military, I was called by my last name. I don't know if there's a real parallel there, but that's the only place in my life where I was called by my last name.
Yeah. And what'd you say, Bud? You were?
my ex still call, I mean, he works for me once in a while. He never calls me by my first name, has never. And
He
I
called
was
you Twilly?
thinking about that today. It's always Mr. Twilly.
Oh, Mr. Twilly. Oh,
Uh-huh.
Huh.
Yeah, strange.
In the South, there's a little bit of a culture of Miss first and then somebody's first name or Mr., you know, Miss Cheryl and Mr. Ken.
Mhm.
Oh, the title and the first name, yeah.
I remember when in band, when I was, I don't know, junior high and high school, they always called you by your last name.
Mhm.
My last name was Smith, and they said, "Smitty, out of the line." You know, I mean, they, always using your last name and yelling at you for something.
It
But-
was like same for me, Cheryl. That and the few organized sports I did in high school. It was like a coach. Same thing, the band direct, marching band, which to Ken's point, is almost in some ways mimicking, a military bit.
Right.
And it wasn't like with a Ms. or a Mrs., a Miss in front of it. It was just the last name.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
and you know what's interesting is sometimes last names are simply more interesting than first names. I mean, Kristen, that's a pretty common name. I love calling you Vandermeer. I think
You do call me Vandermeer, don't you?
I do. I always call you Vandermeer,
I answer to it.
but it's because it's pretty. I like it, I don't know. I'm like you, Kim, with military last names. I think that's to dehumanize, not to humanize. But sometimes,
Right.
I mean, Cheryl Smith is not a very uncommon name. Christy, what about like Loescher? Does that anyone ever? And you're a professor, so they call you Miss Loescher or Dr. Loescher?
Dr.
Well,
Loescher.
the big problem I have is that students seem to assume that male professors are doctor and female professors are Ms.
Ouch.
Coffee cup on my desk that has Mrs. crossed out, Ms. crossed out, and doctor on the bottom. And I do correct them because it's an important thing to not just assume I'm like their teacher in high school.
I love that. I love that.
And it's one of the reasons why on my Zoom I have doctor on my Zoom,
Yeah.
because otherwise people don't remember.
Yeah.
Good for you.
With Elwood and Gaunt and their relationship and the way they were just back and forth and just wouldn't, they didn't trust that the other person cared and they didn't want to get hurt and all this. Did you ever like want to tell them something or say something to one of them, or where were you at with that?
And I had one relationship in my life that was like that. I had a really good guy friend, and we kind of danced around having a relationship, but I was hesitant because I knew it would change the friendship forever.
Yeah.
And we did eventually date for a while. It didn't last very long. And it did change the relationship. It took us a long time to get back to the friendship. So I
Yeah.
could really relate to that part. The whole thing where Gaunt was like, he just, once he has a relationship with somebody, he uses and leaves them. I could really relate to that fear.
Yeah.
Because you see how once you're not a friend, you're a girlfriend, that's a very different treatment.
Yeah.
And isn't it at the very end? Was it who said you'll never love me? Wasn't it?
Yeah. Gaunt
Yeah,
said that.
Gaunt said that to Elwood because Elwood couldn't say I love you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember almost the last line was something like,
Yeah.
okay, that's close, you know.
And they
Go with
were
it.
living together, right?
Yeah.
In
Mhm,
South
in
America.
Brazil.
Yeah, I only remember one reference, and and stuck out because when I got to it, I thought it would have come up more, but just remembering that at this period of time, their behavior was also illegal. And I remember one point when they talked about, I think it was like some younger person came into the base or whatever, wherever they were, and he was like, no, like don't sleep with him, like if you get caught, like they're gonna blame him, and like and they're like, oh, well, he's like, what's the worst that could happen? And he's like, arrested, hung, and he's like, oh, we don't hang
Yeah.
people for that anymore. But it was like very illegal. That was for what, at least another decade or so after that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know when it changed,
Well,
but
Well, and Maude talked about
1974.
how she was working to get the laws changed. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
but no, Kristen, that
That's
was
paragraph
that was Hayes.
175.
What, Ken?
Paragraph 175 was the German law against homosexuality that they talk about how they were fighting it. Maud was fighting it in Germany at that time, but it wasn't until 1974 that homosexuality became that became legal in England. So yeah, that was a part of the way that sexuality was constructed so rigidly that they could have sex with each other as long as it was understood that was only for pleasure, for comfort. It was a distraction. They used the word distraction a lot.
Right.
And the reason that these two boys could not go beyond that was because it would have introduced emotion and affection, into that relationship. And that was the threat, that you might be somebody who would not outgrow this. If you fell in love with, or if you, showed a lot of affection for another boy, then you might be the odd guy out who would never get.
Yeah.
we lose him in the most important of
I
thoughts.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Because to what Ken said, right? I think it's, first of all, like admitting it, you could get in more trouble.
right.
But also I think as a self-protection, knowing that you're expected to, marry a proper woman and raise a proper family and live a proper life, all the air quotes around proper there, to even lie to yourself about what your feelings might be, and to convince yourself that it's just for that comfort and that distraction, because that, or you convince yourself that there's not a path, that there's no path for that. And then, even though they end up living together, still like, I would think always in the back of their mind, wondering what the path looks like.
Yeah. It's scary, right? And I mean, I think it still is for some people, but especially, it hasn't been too many years ago where it was pretty scary. I mean, for you, Joe, in the military, very scary, right? Yeah. So
Well, but even despite that, there were people who understood and supported them.
yeah,
The friend that got his dad to get him to Brazil, and Maude,
Yeah.
and
right.
there were people who understood and still supported them.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is cool. I mean, do you think Gaunt?
I don't usually get to the end of a book and want it to go on, but I want to know about these guys 5 years later and
Oh,
10
yeah.
years later.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think because that this kind of thing and the feelings, is that why Gaunt enlisted to run away from Elwood? Or to run away from being gay, or try to deny that?
No, I do think it was pressure from his family because they were German.
Yeah.
And his mom
Yeah.
was saying, do you want your sister not to be able to marry? And then he got the white feather.
Mm,
Those
yeah.
bitches,
Yeah.
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And I've read a couple of books where they've been featured, and
Yeah.
and that was devastating.
Yeah, that white feather thing, I'm like, wow, just really telling guys that they're not worth a crap if they weren't in uniform,
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's
that
a great movie called The White Feather, starring Heath, what's his name, is starred in Brokeback Mountain.
Keith Ledger.
Mountain.
Heath
Oh,
Ledger.
Keith Ledger.
Yeah, Heath Ledger. The White Feather, starring Heath Ledger,
Really?
is really all about that, and it's a very, very powerful movie.
yeah.
Mhm.
What about Gaunt's first experience leading men over the top? That whole thing that happened, and it's a continuing nightmare and stuff.
Mhm.
I'm like, he was the lieutenant. He was trying to take him over. What was it that caused that he wasn't able to get him to go? Was it just the gas at the time? Is that what it was? And otherwise, you think? But how horrible to
Mm.
shoot one of your guys and not
Well, and he shot him by accident. He meant to shoot
exactly
the sandbag just to threaten them.
right. Yeah.
But it happened where officers had to start shooting people. I mean, that actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine.
I can't either. You're shooting your own
'Cause-
guys, they won't go over.
Well,
And
and
die.
the Somme, it was one of the greatest military disasters. And the whole thing, 60,000
Mm.
dead.
And over just a day or two? I mean, it
Mhm.
was not that long. They just kept
One
going.
day. One day.
And how do
One
you
day?
get people to do something they know is stupid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Deadly stupid.
And I've always, having watched, war movies and read war books and stuff. I mean, how do you get people to sublimate their own intelligence that tells them this is stupid and do it anyway?
Yeah. It's only a matter of if they
Have
don't,
you ever
they're
been
not,
in the
they're,
military?
I just
What?
don't get it.
yeah.
If you
Yeah.
best give you something about proof. You become part of a machine. Your individuality is supposed to disappear. When you become a soldier as a part of the war machine.
Mm.
And so that's how people, it's just like the kind of thing we're watching right now politically. We say, how in the hell can these people be doing what they're doing in this country today, literally today? And it is because they just have been sold this thing where they no longer can think logically or individually in their own best interest. They vote against their own best interests.
Yeah.
And in the military, you're taught to act against your own best interest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Particularly back then. I mean, they didn't, I think it was even harder back then. Their communication and the allowance for the communication between, like, for instance, officers and enlisted. Now there's a little bit more allowance for that, but back
Mm.
then, man, you know, if he was your commanding officer, you just did what you were told, and that was it. You were part of that group of men, and that was part of your job, right? So
That was, you know, that scene too, when he's trying to get them to go. That was one of the points, one of the many points in the book where I just had like paused and reminded myself, like, he is a baby, he's a boy, you
yeah,
know, and in that too, especially in that time when, because of social status, you know, you get like a commission or, you know, all of a sudden, like, these children are now officers, and, you know, what real experience or training do they have um to be in that leadership position? So it's not just the grunts, so to speak, that are charging headfirst without knowledge, but
Well, you're
your
totally
lieutenants and
correct, but what,
captains are still 18, 19 years old.
yeah, what really killed me was when Elwood goes to the colonel and tells him about, and brings that prisoner, and he's chastised for his buttons.
yeah,
Man, I had to put the book down for a bit after that one.
Hmm.
And Boldevere, whatever that kid's name was, who set that all up thinking it'd be a lark.
yeah. Not understanding what he was sending him into.
Yeah.
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 But what was one of the most significant things you learned from this book? What do you think?
That's a big question.
War is a stupid and futile exercise.
Yes, war is horrible,
It's
what
just-
I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't know that
just-
much about
it's
World War One and just how
Humankind at
boring,
our worst.
I think there was one or two allusions to it. It's sad to think that when these young men, because it was mostly young men, were fighting at the time, you know, in their mind it was the war to end all wars, and both sides thinking that once it ended, they were going to bring about this great peace that would last forever. And to think of how much, you know, first of all, World War II, so there's obviously that, very bad. And then how many other wars since then, and the ongoing wars right now, and you're like, come on, do we learn, like, as a human species? Because it seems like an obvious, like, what do we learn from the book? War is fruitless. What do we learn from humankind? We keep doing fruitless things. Like, that's not terribly encouraging.
Yeah.
But
you know, and what about the part that poetry played in this book? Were you guys familiar with the poets and their works that were described?
Some of it.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, like, I know who Tennyson is. I don't think I would be like, oh, this must be a letter from my secret lover because it's written in the style of Tennyson. Like, that would, I'm not. But that just shows that, you know, these were such educated, cultured.
People.
Didn't they like put on the Iliad or something while they
Yeah,
were
and the
in
prisoner of war camp,
They're like,
they had,
oh, let's
they
do
had
it
the
in Greek.
Iliad memorized.
Yeah, we've got it memorized, but let's do it in the original Greek
Yeah.
so that we can participate with more people.
That's part of the whole classism, you know, of what was
Yes.
going on at the time, that these boys were educated in the classics,
Yeah.
you know, before anything else. One of the things you mentioned, the letter writing, I was impressed with how much letter writing moved the narrative forward in this book. How many letters were printed, and I'm old enough to remember when we used to write letters. You know, when I was overseas for a year, writing letters was about the only way for us to communicate in the late 60s, to communicate, you know, back and forth. And when I got home, I realized that I had written almost 100 letters, and my family had kept every single letter that I had written, because we didn't just write letters compose them,
Right.
you know, almost with an understanding that there is something important about this, you know,
Yes.
that it's a piece of literature in some way. And I wonder if we haven't lost something, you know, by the fact that we don't sit down and compose letters any.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I know when I wrote letters, they really became a part of me and part of anybody. And my dad, when he was in Vietnam, he wrote letters to us all the time. I have all his letters that he wrote. I saved them.
Good.
You know, Cheryl, it's interesting because I think the art of letter writing, and I'll go back to being overseas in the military. We used to do those little tiny, because you wrote letters, obviously, and mail call was a big deal, right? When you were far away. But I remember also those little tiny cassette players, the little tiny cassettes and minis, and you'd speak into them. So it was more, you told your day, you told what happened, you know, and you sent those precious, and then you'd listen to them over and over with these nasty little, like, talk about low technology, but they were precious, just like Ken's saying. It's, you know, do you save emails? Maybe, but those things that are written, those things that are physical, yeah, did they have more girth to them? Did they have more weight?
More thoughtfulness, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
going to say. Think
For
about how
me-
thoughtful you are when you sit and write a letter, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
That's right.
I've
Yeah.
talked to friends about this before. Like, I'll look who's on the screen and I will just say, factually, I believe myself to be a little bit younger than most of you. But you know, I got an email address in college, and I have a box of letters from my freshman year that, you know, friends and I wrote to each other. And you know, I got a .edu email address when I got to school, and there was a computer lab with 6 computers. And none of my friends who were at home, my parents, my sister, my grandmother, none of them had email addresses yet. So I wrote letters to all of them. And little by little, as the year went on, my friends who were my age or older, if they were at college, they maybe got a .edu email address, and then we'd switch. And initially, yeah, I reserved time, I had to go to the lab, and I wrote that email the same way as a letter. And then that very quickly, everybody gets email, and then we get jobs, we all have email addresses at work. Then we get cell phones. As long as we text after 9 p.m., it's free. Then you can text all the time. And now it's like the banter is more frequent, but the conversation is, I'm less thoughtful about what I'm going to share. I'm not trying to sit down and sum up a week,
Right.
you know, or anything. But yeah, you're making me want to go write some letters to people now.
Yeah.
Well, and
And they're all going to think I'm dying, and I get something from me. Like,
yeah, I'm at UT, and we have a repository called the Harry Ransom Center that's its job. It keeps the letters and the different kinds of writings and stuff that would have been left to the university. And that's the way historians figure out what happened and what it was like. And I don't know how much there is to tell people what today is like.
And I saw something just last week. It was probably like a Facebook reel itself or an Instagram thing itself. And, you know, they were saying like, oh, there are some people who say, oh, we have all of this record of our lives today. But she's like, but do we? Who's going to have my Instagram password when I pass away? So,
Right.
you know, maybe if I'm a 25-year-old, I'm sharing 30 pictures a day. But is anybody going to ever be able to see them in the future, as opposed to the physical collections that we have in these places right now? You know, whether that be a book or a letter or a physical photograph or a postcard that has those things and is collected, there really is not that sort of we share stuff all the time, but then we put it behind, you know, passwords and privacy, and it's not curated in any way. That there doesn't seem to be
That's
a
right.
way for people 100 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
if they, you know, even want to know what I had for brunch. But
Yeah. How about PTSD then and now?
Mm.
How is it treated or dealt with, or what do you think?
Well, it obviously was seen as a weakness,
Yes,
and I think it still largely is, as opposed to a condition. Maybe we're a little better now.
Yeah, he found like a handful of people that if those who were, you know, in the same or similar experiences, recognized, you know, there were some who were like, no, don't worry about it, it's okay. But for the most part, he was more ostracized and more cut off for showing.
And they were told, just
anything.
forget about things. Don't talk about it. Don't just forget about it.
Yeah.
And that's the absolute worst thing for PTSD.
And he was ashamed of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's stigma, right, attached to it. And you know, I had an issue that happened in the Marine Corps that I had actually pushed away. I had forgotten about it so severely. And Cheryl, you'll remember this, that Edie Disler, who's often on here with us, she and I were in the military together. We were in officer
We were in
candidate school
college
together,
together,
the University
yeah.
of Michigan. Yeah. And anyway, coming back from, I think, our second cruise, we're in the truck just driving back from Houston, Cheryl and I and Edie and Mandy. And Edie said, whatever happened to that guy, you know? And I'm like, what guy? And she said, you know, the guy that, you know, the whole stalking thing. And I'm like, and I had forgotten it 100%, to the point of Cheryl said, I'd started to cry because I remembered the memory, right, that I had pushed away and never dealt with in the Marine Corps, even though there was this big sting and the guy was caught and thrown in jail, and but all this stuff happened. And I was never offered any kind of care. And Cheryl, you like, how long have we known each other? 20 some years. And she had never heard me mention it because I had forgotten it. And then once I had remembered it, I had to remember it. And man, without going into it, it took me a while, didn't it, Cheryl, to admit I have PTSD from this harrowing experience. But I had to, as I went to therapy and did that stuff and tried to do the right thing, I had to come out again to myself. Like, I'm a person with this thing, and this is a part of who I am. It explained a lot to me, like I had totally forgotten. I mean, I won't sleep on the ground floor anywhere, and she knows this. We have a house. We're having an upstairs bedroom. There's like non-negotiables, and hotels, and I'm scared of the dark, and all these things. I didn't know why I was this way, and it all kind of came back. And I don't talk much about it. I didn't know how to tell my mom, like as an adult, as a freaking 60-year-old. So even though I think we're dealing much better with mental health, and especially after COVID, right? There's so much more need and help and awareness of mental health. There's still stigma today, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Didn't mean to
Isn't
bring the
it-
energy down.
No, but isn't it, I mean, just it makes me think about what you said, Ken, and that it's like nothing has changed. We've still got a class system. It might not be the same kind of class system. We've still got, you know, issues around PTSD. We've still got war is still going on and still is ugly, and still people are doing it. You know, it's like we just continue in the same path, you know. Pretty wild. And yet here is this couple that's finding their way at the end of the book into a loving, caring relationship, right?
Yeah, I think that's all you do is you can't change the whole world. You just got to change your world.
Mhm.
Mm.
And then when you change your world, you touch somebody else and maybe they change their world around them. And I don't know how long it'll take, but
Yeah. Well, it was nice to be able to find something like that in the whole war book, right?
Mm.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, we are pretty well up to the hour, folks.
Oh.
Anybody have any last thoughts, or do we need to try to pick another book? Or
Yes, you do.
Yes.
hey, Cheryl, can I share something real quickly?
sure.
Because you and Joe and Barb and everyone gave me some control over the Sanctuary Facebook page. So if you
Ooh.
guys are not on Facebook, or if you dabble every now and again, can you make sure you're following the Sanctuary page? And I'm going to start putting book club as well as some other meetings up there as events. You don't have to RSVP. But if you do RSVP, you'll get reminders that way as well. So that'll be, I know there's emails, there's been text messages some days in the past. There's all kinds of things. It's just one more way to stay connected. And also just to point to people, if you want to invite more people to join us to like check it out that way and see what's going on. So,
That's a great
and I will
idea,
also say
Kristen.
the YouTube page has 99 subscribers, and I think it'd be kind of cool if there were 100. So you could check out former book clubs if you went there and wanted to see what other books we've been talking about in the past, or again, if you want to invite a new friend to join, I think that's a great place to point them.
Yeah.
You're my
And we are
hero,
very,
Kristen.
very blessed to have you come and join the team and do these things for us and with us, Kristen. So thank you so much. You've given us some impetus to become more marketable, I think.
Well, and actually, Cynthia was sharing with me today, she said there was a period where we although Sanctuary wasn't doing anything, we had a little bit of a dark period for a bit, we could still be communicating and talking. And Kristen, you brought that to the table. And the events idea is so fun because, like Cynthia said, if we shared with people what we're doing on the cruise, or what events we're doing, and what, people want to connect. And so with those events, Kristen, if people say, I think you can RSVP, I'm coming, or thinking about it, then other people, you can send that, and someone else might say, hey, I'm coming. I mean, Christy, I always think of you and Sharon right away to go, hey, Sharon, are you coming tonight? With those events, you can invite folks, right? And you can share to other people. So
yes,
yeah,
you can add to people. And typically if you either respond that you're coming, or you could just say you're interested if you're not sure, that's the Facebook option. Typically that will then show up on your page, so your friends will see that you have responded to it. And they may even ask you like what it's all about, and maybe it's not somebody you thought of inviting, and it could be a way. So again, that'll be for book club, as well as whenever Ken's back in the kitchen, the various Sanctuary things we have, and including the cruise in November. I'll set that one up as a event as well. And of course, no obligation to RSVP, but it's another way to share. And just by RSVPing, you show that the community is active, and that makes other people see things
curious,
often,
intrigued.
hear about it more often, and remind them that the group is here. So
thank you, Kristen.
all right, well, back to you, Cheryl. Are we gonna pick another book?
Bing, Cheryl, the
Books.
last Tuesday in February is the 27th. It's the 4th Tuesday. So
that's you're picking the date. Is that what you're saying?
I do the easy stuff.
Oh, well, dang.
You're welcome.
So I guess we're going to do it on February 27th, but what book are we going to read?
That's up to y'all.
Did you guys get so wrapped up in this one? You're like, oh, I don't know if I can read another book.
Ken, what about that book you read about the evangelical? Is that worth reading?
Oh God, yes. In fact, I wanted to suggest it. I didn't want anybody to, it is partisan political. And I didn't want anybody to think, maybe we shouldn't be reading anything that's going to be that partisan, but it's entitled The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. And it's an incredible book about basically what happened to the evangelical church. Here's the book. You know, how in the world did Christians end up supporting the most unchristian person on the planet? And this book basically sets out to explain that, you know, how that happened. It's fascinating. I couldn't put it down. I read it over the holidays, and it's an amazing book. If you want to read, I'd love for us to read this together and discuss it, but it is it's pretty political if we want to avoid that.
And Christy, the committee has like 70 books going all the time. Any suggestions from anything the committee's written?
Yeah, so The Women by Kristen Hannah, Hannah.
We've read a couple of her, we've read one or two of her books before.
Oh,
but
have we?
Not that one, I don't remember.
What is that one about?
Women Can Be Heroes with 20-year-old nursing student Frankie McGrath. Here's those words. It's a revelation. Raised in the sun-drenched idyllic world of Southern California and sheltered by conservative parents. She basically goes, it's 1965. She goes to Vietnam as a nurse.
Oh,
That'd be good.
See, we haven't done that war yet.
No,
I didn't know if we wanted to do another war.
Well, we said, I think the comment was with this book, like we had done a couple World War II books, and we're like, well, we haven't done World War I yet. So now.
Another committee recommendation was Crossing to Safety, which is an older book by a guy named Steiger, Steiger.
I'm putting these in the chat, y'all, if you want to Google them.
That's set in Vermont and Wisconsin.
and what
Hello,
is
Beautiful.
what's it about?
Yeah, Crossing to Safety. Let me make sure I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, Crossing to Safety was written in 2007.
what was the Kristen Hannah book?
Kristen
The
Hannah book
Women.
is The Women,
The Women, okay,
and it's about women nurses in Vietnam.
yeah.
There's a little smidgen on Crossing to Safety in the chat, if you can open that up and
okay.
read it. I'll try and do the same thing for women, Christy.
Okay.
Okay.
Not for nothing, but why is Crossing to Safety $91 in paperback on Amazon?
Oh, wow. I didn't notice.
What?
I didn't notice that.
Hold on, I'm gonna see if there's another link to this. That can't be right. Is this like, how old is this book? Is this like bound in human skin or?
Right.
What is-
Another recommendation was Hello Beautiful by Napolitano. And
Hold
that
on
was
here.
just-
Hold on one second, Christy. I'll get the women in.
Okay.
And then, so there's the women. There's one Crossing to Safety, then the women. And then what's the other one, Christy? Final?
Hello Beautiful by Napolitano, Napolitano. And this is a homage to Little Women,
Oh,
a profoundly moving portrait of what is possible when we choose to love someone, not in spite of who they are, but because of it. And that was a recommendation from one of these roommates from Michigan that we just talked to a week or so ago, and we were sharing what books we were reading.
This is also an Oprah's book club.
Yeah,
Special.
Hello Beautiful is also an Oprah's book club pick, and it's a new book.
I'll just say so that you don't cross off the Crossing to Safety, it is also available for $17 with
Yeah.
a cover. But apparently there is a collector's edition should anyone feel they need that. But
I think it won some awards.
Out for that.
Yeah, it's an older book and it won some awards.
Yeah, apparently.
just reading the little bit that Joby wrote in there, it sounds like your committee almost, you came together for a little bit and now you stayed forever together. Bonded.
I love that. When we say the committee, Christy and I are a gang of 6 college roommates that are still good friends, and we meet as often as the book club meets, at
That's
least.
awesome.
Every month still. It's amazing.
So the Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory, that is not fiction, is it?
No,
No.
No,
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure.
I
The
have
rest
to
of
read enough
these-
nonfiction in my real life.
yeah.
I hear you.
So we've got 3 right there, unless anybody else want to throw one up. Krista, you are fabulous. Thank you.
Well, those are all ones I haven't read yet, but friends I've had have read them and have loved them.
Well, I just finished a life story of Elon Musk.
Ugh.
And if you want to try to understand the future, boy, that book brings it all. Artificial intelligence, rockets, you name it. It's all in
Look at
there.
that.
Wow.
By Walter Isaacson, who also wrote the biography of Steve Jobs.
Oh,
How did you feel after reading that, Cynthia?
Well, I felt scared about the future.
I wondered.
And I've just had a terrible round with my Citibank account. They closed it down for no reason. And when took me 5 days to get it unlocked. And all I had done is move some money around. Anyway, it turns out it was all artificial intelligence that did it.
Mm.
Wow.
And the big banks are all doing that now. You can't talk to a person because a person didn't do it to you.
Mm-hmm.
wow, that's weird.
Yep. So, but you really, when you read that book about Musk, I mean, he's of course very nuts. We know that, but it's interesting to see an outsider writing this book about him, and there's not holding anything back, but you know, the way that the space program is now privately run and, you know, basically by him. And it's just very fascinating.
Yeah, Bezos is getting in on it now too. There's going to be
Mhm.
Amazon rockets as well.
Mm.
And I keep thinking of Wall-E.
What's your pleasure, folks?
All right, I'm
Well,
not gonna add to the list. I'm
I
gonna
think
chime
any of
in.
those
Oh, go ahead.
any of those first 3 were, you know, sounded
I
interesting.
vote for fiction.
Yeah,
Yeah, I do too.
I'm always a fiction voter, selfishly too. I like the crossing to safety one. I'm also always a fan of stories that take a lifetime,
Mm.
you know, so that it starts with them as young and then a lifetime of friendship. That bit intrigues me. So I'm gonna put my vote in for either Crossing to Safety or Hello Beautiful. Those are my 2 personally.
And then when it's time for another war book, Kristen, we can come back to the woman.
Mhm.
Sure.
That one sounds really intriguing. I just know we've read at least one Kristen Hanna, if not more than one. So just to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And Crossing to Safety is an Audible book as well. It is on Audible.
I'll vote for Crossing to Safety.
I will too.
All right, let's do that one.
That's 3. We're about a decorum. Kay says
Good.
yes.
Everybody's
Done deal.
good?
Is Crossing to Safety by Steiger?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just on Amazon, and what's on there is Wallace Stegner, Stegner. Is that the same book or a different book?
Same. Think. Steigner.
Let me get it right. Is it Crossing to Safety?
Stegner.
Oh, N-E-R.
Right?
Stegner.
Stegner.
Oh, wait a minute. There is a couple
Same?
different Crossing to Safeties. We want the Steiger, Steiger.
Okay.
You
Wow.
are good catch.
Okay, hold on.
Good catch.
Okay.
Oh, because this Stegner guy also was written
A Crossing to
a
Safety.
long time ago, and so
Yeah.
I grabbed that. Spell his name again? S-T.
E-I.
What I have is Steiger. But that may be wrong.
I feel like that might be a typo because what the
Yeah,
crossing.
maybe
the
it's
one-
Maybe it's
Yeah,
IE.
no, the one that comes up on Amazon, the S-T-E-G-N-E-R matches the,
Well, I pulled that. That's me.
yeah.
So Christy,
Oh, is that the
Um,
description? Yeah, go to that.
well, I'm just trying to find anything by the other writing, and I don't see anything.
This guy,
Oh.
S-T-E-G-N-E-R, the way Joby has it.
Oh, okay. I think
Yeah.
I see, they just changed, it's just a different, it's the same book. It is Stegner, Stegner. It's the same book. It looks like just different covers.
Yeah, one for
Okay.
$17 and one for 92.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Okay, so hold on here.
You got it right,
Yeah,
Joe.
so it's Stegner.
Wallace.
Wallace, yes. Yeah, and there's just a couple of different covers on there that was confusing me.
Yeah.
And I had the wrong guy written down.
Eh,
Happens. There we
Close
go,
enough.
right there on the bottom. Crossing to Safety by Wallace Stegner.
There we go.
good.
And I'm gonna write that down.
Oh, Cheryl, there's a study guide.
Oh, good. Sometimes I use them and sometimes I don't. They're, some of them are good and some of them are not.
Yeah.
What we would be interested in.
Nice
Still
to
don't know why
have them all.
this particular one is $92.
Whoa,
With the study guide, you have to pay $92 for
No,
gift?
no, the book with the different cover. It's
Oh, yeah.
Kindle, it's paperback for $16.85, and then there's a study guide, and then there's a different cover, same title, and for some reason it's $91.24.
must be leather.
I'm clearly not buying that one. I'm just
Is
super
that a
curious.
hardcover or is it leather or what is it?
I don't know.
All right, well,
Well, and I just got Crossing to Safety for free on Audible.
Yeah, I see that with yeah.
Mhm.
all right. Crossing to Safety it is,
Thank you.
On the 27th,
February 27th.
Oh.
eking out the month.
I am
Is that
traveling that night, Cheryl. I am in Michigan with the cow people, happy cow people. So I will miss that, and I will miss all y'all.
Okay,
So
Well,
Kay, are you gonna be here? Because someone's got to know to start this thing, right?
hey, you might have to take over Joe's role and start it. What do you think?
So Kay, talk about the cruise, invite people on the cruise, and fix your hair. You're good to go.
Okay.
All right,
So
I'm gonna
enthusiastic about it.
stop this recording because we're so.